Welcome to the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show, and I'm your host, Richard Wray. My mission is to help entrepreneurs understand AI and use it to their advantage. Join me today where we dig deep with our guest and get you the best concepts and strategies. Today's special guest is Eric Clague. As a former sergeant in the US Army and as a police officer, Eric has always been committed to service, leadership, and excellence. This has led to his latest endeavor, PoliceReports.ai. Today, we're talking about revolutionizing law enforcement. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really great to have you here, Eric. And first question I ask all my guests: where in the world are you?
I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida currently.
A lovely sunny place normally. What's the weather like at the moment?
Lovely and sunny.
Well, there we go. We're in
Yep.
good shape then. That's excellent news. Okay, well, let's get into this then. I did a very brief intro about you today because you've got so much that I want to talk to you about. You've got such a history. But tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, you've been in the army and you've become a police officer subsequently.
So originally from New Jersey, about 24 hours north of where I live right now.
Hmm.
When I was 18, I joined the Army. I spent 5 years in the Army, and got to see the whole world pretty much. Some good places, some bad places. Never made it over to Australia yet, but maybe one day.
One day.
Uh, got out of the Army. I became a police officer. As a police officer, held several different roles. I was a field training officer, narcotics detective, um, acting supervisor, and then about a year ago, just slightly, actually, just over a year ago, I decided to pursue my marketing agency full time. Um, I began with that endeavor, and I was also developing PoliceReports.ai, which is what we're here to talk about today, obviously. And
Mhm.
after about a year of developing it, it really took off, and it became a full time endeavor for me and my entire team.
Fantastic. So tell us about policereports.ai. What actually is it?
So yeah, essentially, law enforcement officers, and it's actually the same in Australia too, because I've had the opportunity to speak with several police officers in Australia
Okay.
recently. Spend, I mean, it's probably anywhere from 3 hours of their shift writing reports. That's monotonous, mundane. A lot of the things probably don't even need to be reports, but per policy, procedure, and law, they are reports. So we've taken the document completion process and trimmed it down to about 5 minutes for a report. So it
In
enables,
comparison to 3 hours worth normally, yeah?
on average, a report's about 35 minutes. So you have to take
Okay.
into account most officers are taking more reports than one per shift, depending on
Okay. Okay.
um, yeah, depending on where they're at and how busy it is. So we're completing full police reports in about 5 minutes.
That's pretty impressive. And how have you gone about achieving that level of efficiency?
So what we've done is essentially we've leveraged machine learning and artificial intelligence to take an input from the officer. Obviously, the officer still needs to tell the software what happened. They
Mhm.
explain what happened to the software, and then using proprietary algorithms that are custom built to each police department to follow their policy and procedure and consistency with report writing, a report is generated off of the information that the officer provided.
And where has this been taken up? Is this something that a police officer can take on their own accord, or are there specific forces that are using it at the moment?
Yep. So there's several agencies that are using it within the U.S. currently. We vend directly to the police department, so that way it's standardized. And then there's certain in the U.S. and I'm sure really anywhere, there's certain data privacy laws, so that's why we
Mhm.
vend directly to the agency.
Very interesting. So, how is the data collected in the first place? We see police with body cams, and now we see AI devices coming to market, like the Rabbit device, which is supposedly an AI device that you can have sat on your shoulder almost. I mean, is it some combination of that sort of approach?
Yep, it's similar to that. Sometimes it's a voice note, sometimes it's from interview video. Um, but yeah, it's there's no keystrokes that the officer has to complete um, if they follow the training. So yeah, it can either be from video, voice note. really, however, we have multiple facets to provide our software with the data that's necessary.
And have you found police officers kind of accepting or not accepting this new style of technology?
So it's at the end user level. So the patrol officer, the detective, we have nothing but surprisingly great feedback. I was a police officer for 7 years, and I know one thing that cops love to do is complain. And I'm waiting for the complaints to start rolling in, but we don't have too many other than they didn't watch the training video and they just don't know how to use it. Um, you know, any new innovations are always difficult to deal with. Like, for example, electricity when it first became publicly available, 15% of people were like, "I'll buy this." Everybody else thought it was dangerous, right? And it's the same thing with AI. So a lot of that's like proper education to the administrators that are because they're
Mhm.
ultimately at the end of the day the ones making the purchasing decision. So properly educating the administrators, hey, this is just text completion. We're not here. We're not going to be out investigating these crimes for you. We're not going to be uh, taking over your mainframes with artificial general intelligence. No robots are coming out anywhere. It's very safe. Your data is held securely, probably more securely than your current systems. But I think once all that education, you know, catches up, we usually see really, really positive feedback from the administrators.
That's really interesting. So tell me, when people have started to use this, and some of them may have embraced it, some of them may have been, a little nervous, a slight amount of trepidation when they first started off. What's been some of the big wins that you've seen? Has somebody tried it for the first time or use it for a short amount of time and gone, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing."
Yeah, so that's pretty much what we get a lot of the time. I think one of the best feelings is when myself or somebody on our sales team gets like a text message from one of because we offer a trial when
Hmm.
we start with the agencies, and they get a message from one of like the trial users and like, this is great. This is so cool. What else can you guys do? Can you do something else? And
Hmm.
can you make another system for this? And we tell them, "Oh, well, if we get enough requests, we will be there, but this is our main focus." And I think um, one of the when I really knew it was going to work was when we were beta testing and I gave it to an officer to use. And the first thing they said after the first time they used it was, "I can't wait to take another report." Those are words that have never been heard in
I was going to say,
policing.
that sounds like, are you sure? Are
Yeah,
you okay?
yep, yep. So when they said, "I can't wait to take another report," I said, "Okay, well, we're on to something here."
That's really impressive. So, are you finding it's also changing the way that people are actually policing in the first place? Because if they're actually in a position where they can focus more on being police officers rather than having to take down all the notes, does it change their approach at all?
So I think it will. I definitely think it will. We don't have long-term data yet. We
Mhm.
don't have. I mean, we would need to see data from probably a year or longer of it. There is a prominent organization in the US here that has requested to do a study on one of the agencies, and it looks like one of the next agencies we're starting with, they are will probably start on a study with them. And I think these are just my predictions. My prediction is we're going to see officers involved more in the community again. We're going to see officers being more effective. What I so traditionally in law enforcement, a lot of the systems are behind, right?
Mhm.
At least in U.S. law enforcement. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but at least in U.S. law enforcement, a lot of these systems are behind traditionally.
But behind in
So
what way?
I'd say like technologically, like 10 years behind the private sector.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's not, especially at the patrol level. Like the men and women you see driving around cars going to calls. Um, a lot of the stuff's really, really behind. And I think one thing is the people who you send to your house, business, or whatever on the worst day of your life should have the systems to let them effectively police. And that's really not the case. And that's the whole premise behind PoliceReports.ai. Because not only does it take time to write these reports? Mentally, it can be exhausting because it's just so annoying and repetitive. So now, not only are you increasing effectiveness, but you're increasing officer quality of life as well. And I think those two things are huge. Um,
So let's just go into that a little bit. The quality of life aspect for the officers themselves. So obviously, this is an incredibly stressful job, and getting actually people to become police officers, I believe, is slightly more challenging than it has been in the past these days. Is that a fair statement?
very fair statement. Yes,
Yeah.
I would say that I can't confirm the statistic. It was just something I heard, but it seems right just from me being a police officer and seeing it. 33% of officers who have been on the job for less than 10 years will leave before they hit that 10-year mark. I think that's correct. I've heard it. I haven't been able to confirm
Mhm.
it, but I think that's pretty accurate. And I only think that's getting worse. And there's several reasons why that's like that. One, uh, the job is not. It doesn't have the same public opinion as it did, 5, 10 years ago, um, with like the riots in
Mhm. Mhm.
2020. Um, pay uh, pay is increasing, but most people are going to look at this and say, I have a degree from wherever. I can go get a job doing the same thing for the same amount of pay. So people are really comparing and contrasting the options as opposed because you don't have that public sentiment of, oh, it's such a great job, or, these we're really out here helping people. Everybody doesn't really look at it like that anymore. So really hard to find qualified applicants. And what's the first thing you do when you can't find qualified applicants? You lower the standards. So the standards are becoming lower. I think in the next 5 years, police hiring is going to be an epidemic. You're going to have a lot of medium-sized agencies that didn't have any problem filling spots, maybe getting consumed by the county or the state because uh, they can't facilitate proper police response.
So literally, there's going to be that rate of attrition where just because you can't get hold of good people, things are going to have to merge.
Yep, because you're losing people from two ends, right? You're not getting the same qualified candidates, and then you have people retiring when they hit their 20, 25 years, 30 years, and then you have a significant amount of people leaving before they hit 10 years of service. So right, it's really three ends that
Yeah,
you're
it
losing
sounds
people
like
from.
it's been there is an attack almost from every direction possible here. So with all of police forces around the world, there's increased regulation. I don't think you can look at any country where that isn't happening. So obviously, with the reports that people have to write afterwards, there's got to be a lot more detail. My assumption is that your system significantly helps with that.
Yep. So, right, like the first thing, one of the biggest issues we ran into in development was is what is being presented by the user, the data presented by the user, correct in the output, right? Are
Mhm.
they the same? Meaning wise, we want to make it look prettier, right? For lack of a better term.
Make it more
But we,
understandable, easier to
but yes,
comprehend.
as long as the data is the same. So this took us a while to really lock down and dial in, but once we did that, we realized it was one, what it does is it shows officers what a good report should look like. So a lot of these new officers who don't have the experience and maybe the mentorship that officers 10 years ago would have had can now see, okay, this is how my police department wants these reports written. So when they see that, the more they do it, and then they're providing voice notes, right? Or
Mhm.
data from transcription, from video. So they're providing those two things. So now they can see, okay, this is what I can ask in the report. This is what I can ask during my investigation because I noticed it was missing in the report. So as they grow as officers, this will not just be a tool to make their lives easier. It'll be a tool to make them better police officers.
Okay, so walk me through the process of what will happen on a day-to-day basis when police officers are using your service.
All right. So we show up. do whatever meeting you have or however your agency works. Then you go out on the street and you go to a call. Say your first call is a theft somewhere.
Mhm.
You show up, find the guy, arrest him. Say he stole a bunch of, I don't know, just took various things. He was
Yeah.
outside when you showed up. You arrest him, get all your witness statements, all your victim statements, get your suspect statements, um, drop him off at jail. Now, previously, so you once all that's done, right? Previously, you'd go, depending on your agency, you'd park under a tree somewhere and type, go back to a report writing room and sit in the report writing room and type there. Um, with this now, you're driving back. You either upload your video if you're on an integrated platform with us, or you provide a voice note just saying what happened. The above date I showed up here. Suspect was outside. This is all his info. So while you're driving back to from county jail or wherever, um, you're getting your report done. So then you pull over, pull into a parking lot, click submit, report generates. You make sure everything's correct. Um, Add things if you need to. Really, we don't see many people having to add things. And then throw it in your record management system, send it for approval, and get back out there.
Getting this sort of information down correctly, obviously where crimes are involved, is incredibly important because this could end up in court at some point, and you've got to make sure that the information is correct and validated. Have there been any examples so far where the sort of information that's been going into these reports has already ended up in court cases?
I mean, yeah, anytime you arrest somebody, it's going through the legal like the system.
So
So
it's already active in that respect. It is already having an
Mhm.
effect and getting in there. Yeah.
Yeah, we're already live in several places.
And has anybody pushed back in court to say, well, this is an AI recording or anything like that? Have they tried to use that as some form of defense?
No, not we haven't heard it yet. Sure, they'll try, but in our opinion, every legal opinion ever, the only time. So, all right, other ways reports are written. Let's get into that first.
Hmm.
The user types them, right?
Yep.
Um, or there's transcription services. They call somebody and have them type it for them. Or in some places, they tape record something and drop the voice recorder off with a secretary who then
And then they have to type it out.
transcribes it. Why is this any different, right? Other than it's easier. So reports in themselves, as the Supreme Court's ruled, various case law, anything like that, they're hearsay. So you have to go and testify to them anyway. If there's something incorrect in the report, well, the officer should have checked it. Um, but we all make mistakes. So I, I've made mistakes in reports and then have had to testify to them, right? And somebody asks, but you said this, but in your report says this, and you say, yeah, it was a mistake. Um,
You are only human after all.
You are only human. Now, obviously, if there's something nefarious where the officer's lying or something like that, we can't stop that. That's on the
But the vast
agency.
majority of police
Yeah,
officers wouldn't ever do anything like that. I
no.
mean, that's the whole
The
point. That you get
yeah,
terrible cases, but that's the vast majority of
yeah,
police officers. They're about the service.
yeah. I'd say. I mean, I don't even know of any cases where, like, personally, obviously they're on the news, but like
Mhm.
personally, I've never met anybody who's ever lied on the stand. I've met a lot of cops, so um, it's the biggest thing I would say is all we're doing is streamlining the process. So I'm sure at some point it's going to be brought to question. But for example, the Florida bar, the people who are essentially over all the attorneys in Florida just ruled AI can be used. They
Mhm.
put out a legal opinion. It wasn't a ruling, but they just gave a legal opinion that AI can be used all as long as it's for document completion and the end user ensures validity. Same thing's going on here.
And one of the things that I'm guessing happens here is there must be a significant reduction in costs
Yeah.
for the service themselves, because if you were previously having to sit there and type or call into somebody, a secretary, or even drop off a recording, this must be so much cheaper. I mean, is there a ratio you can quote?
Yeah, so there is it really depends on how many reports the agency's taking, but on average, at like an average 300 person agency, we're predicting that in person hours and overtime hours combined, we're saving the agency somewhere near seven figures.
That's amazing. And again, going back to the mental health, the actual stress on the officers themselves, for them to suddenly just be able to go, this is done in 5 minutes as opposed to 35 minutes minimum per
Minimum.
incident, that's got to take away so much stress from them in an incredibly stressful environment in the first place.
Yep. And I really think that's the huge thing. Because most police softwares, most law enforcement softwares, when they're made because they either have to be there because of some law or some policy or something that happened. Um, there's nothing really that's out there that's made to make the end user's life easier in law enforcement, at least. There's nothing. Every time a new system comes into place, there's always a joke. It's like, well, what do we have to do now? Now we're going to have another list that they put us in for not doing something. And this is actually not the case, right? Um, we're selling, we're giving something for the end users, and we're convincing the command staff that this will work. And that's a very new thing, especially like in law enforcement. It's a very new thing. Um,
Okay, so what I'm hearing here then is, and I'm guessing this is the same all over the world, constantly new rules and regulations. The police officers are having to try and keep up with all of these things, and sometimes it's going to be very difficult and complex. Not everybody's walking around with a law degree, or whatever it might be, to be able to fully understand these things. Does the AI system that you have ask questions to help the police officer actually put the right information into their reports?
so yes, as we are in the process, we have something in beta testing right now. We just need more data from one of the agencies that wants to use it. But essentially a report checker, yes, to where it checks the report.
So, from what I'm hearing, again, it sounds like it doesn't matter what new rules come along or not new whatever legislation might come along in the future. The police themselves, they can just focus on police work, and the AI can help them write the reports in the correct way, provide the correct information, help format it in a understandable way, and make sure that when it gets to the point where this information needs to be used, be it in court or whatever part of the legal system it might be, it is in the most understandable format possible.
Exactly.
That sounds really great. So, with a system like that, there must be other environments, other services that could make use of it. Have you had conversations with anybody else?
Yep. So we're branching out currently into firefighters and the EMTs or EMS,
Yeah.
emergency medical services. The reports are a lot similar, and yeah,
I mean, I could see this being used just about anywhere where somebody's got to go out and write a report. So, whether it's one of the services or somebody going out and even just installing something in your home and making sure that things are done correctly.
sure. And building workflows off of that is all very possible. And it would even be in those services, ones that are less regulated by like data security laws. You could even write some type of report off of uh, like a work order or something like that, um, with
That's
very
great.
very minimal user input.
So, when you go along to a new service, be it police or anything else, how long does it take from that first tick in the box where somebody says, "Yeah, we're going to try you out," to actually being up and running typically?
It's a good question. So it depends on the agency and how quick they want to adopt us, and what type and how the procurement process is going to go.
Mhm.
So we've had larger agencies take weeks, and we've had smaller agencies take months. But I would say on average, you're looking at about 2 to 3 months. Um, you can probably get a trial started in like a month, and then from there, you'll have 2 more months, after the trial of, going through contract negotiations, all that stuff.
Very interesting. And how long between the service being up and running to seeing effects, seeing positive benefits are you usually seeing?
The first report.
Literally that
Uh,
fast?
yeah, we do a really good job as well of keeping in touch with the end users,
Mhm.
because we see often when softwares are getting trialed within police departments, more or less the salespeople, cater to the command staff because those are the decision makers. And not saying we disregard the bosses, but we really, really want to make sure the end user experience is good. Because if the end user experience is good, it's going to be something where they're not going to stop talking about it. And if the the signature authority doesn't buy it, it's gonna cause an uproar, essentially.
So you go
Um,
through your trial stage, and obviously you've got to make
mm,
sure that works well. As you say, that
yeah,
first report almost seems to be magic in that respect, and that people go, "Wow, where has this been all my life?" And then you
sure.
speak to their bosses. I'm sure there are formal reports that you hand in, and then it just goes from there.
Yep, yep. So yeah, usually we tell that we provide, and there's a training provided too. It's
Hmm, hmm,
a training platform that we have, so everything's signed off on. So when we talk to the agency first, we get their permission. They give us the trial names. We send over the training.
hmm.
Sometimes we show up in person if the training is large enough, like if there's enough users for the trial period, and then yeah, they go and we hear very, very good things back.
I say on the mental health side for the officers themselves, this has to be an incredibly beneficial thing. So this is wonderful news and a great service by the sounds of it.
Yep, and there's a theory I have. It hasn't really been proven. I've done a little bit of research. I'm no clinical psychologist or anything like that, but I would think that if you go through a significantly traumatic incident, somebody's dead or
Hmm.
whatever, right? I would think it would be easier to talk about it, uh, say it out loud, even if it's just to a computer, get everything down, and then throw it out on a piece of paper or, well, a digital piece of
Yeah.
paper, and then put
Who
it into the
uses paper
records
these days?
management system. Right. Yeah. Well, you say that, but New York City Police Department still handwrites reports.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just let's just dive into that for a second then, because
Yeah.
it's the classic thing of somebody has written a report and their handwriting may not be the best.
Mhm.
They're not necessarily in the best environment to sit down and actually
No,
write this out. So the quality of the reports must be somewhat lacking on occasion.
I would say more than on occasion. You're only giving people so much. Like the tools, if you're giving them inadequate tools, the reports are going to be inadequate. And that's the case. There's a lot of larger police departments that either they're still handwriting reports or they have to print out the reports. And
Mhm.
LAPD, they have to print the reports out and give them to somebody to look at.
That's just amazing, isn't it? You think these days we're all walking around with digital devices and we see, the tsunami that is AI at the moment, and people are still having to look at, pieces of paper and having to write things down. It must be an absolute nightmare.
Yep. And nowhere is the same. I think there's 20 something thousand law enforcement agencies, not counting jails. So
Mhm.
counting like places where people are out patrolling in the US, there's about 20,000. And not one place does it the same.
That is an astonishing number. So
Yep.
literally, you could be somebody with a decade's worth of service. You move to a different region, you become a cop there, and you've got to do a whole thing totally different.
Yes.
That's amazing. I mean, whereas with your system, even if it is totally different, it wouldn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. So we build out the back end algorithms for each report, each report type that each agency has. So we train it on policy and procedure for each agency. So if agency A writes reports a certain way, they write evaluation reports, whatever, a certain way, and agency B writes it another way. Simple. We can train up the system to in about a day, and build those out custom for them.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Eric, that's been really interesting. If there was one piece of advice that you would want people to take away from this conversation today, what would it be?
Say one piece of advice would be uh, always ask questions. Always try to make the situation that you're in better, whether it's better for an industry or just better for yourself. I think, right, that's what's happened in law enforcement. It's gone so long with nobody asking, why are we doing it like this? Nobody's tried to innovate. So ask questions and try to innovate.
I love that piece of advice. And you're making a real difference. And this is one of the great things about using AI, making that difference, not being afraid of it and using it in a constructive way. So, Eric, what a great service you've got there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap on another awesome guest episode for the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage show. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we would be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at aiadvantage.show right now. Until next time, I'm Richard Wray, and if you're an entrepreneur, get the AI advantage today.